Our text this morning is, "My times are in your hands." And as we do so, we remind ourselves that God has ordained the whole matter of time before this world began. And God has ordained those lights, which I cannot pass over, the one light, the larger light being 400 times larger than the smaller light, but the smaller light is 400 times closer to us than the larger light, and so we can enjoy such a chance event as a solar eclipse. So here we are commemorating that one revolution is done and one is about to begin. And how are we to think of what we face in the new year? Well, Charles Spurgeon preached on Psalm 31:15 on May 17th, 1891, which was about 6 months before he died, and he was already very sick. And he says towards the end of the sermon, "I have not been able to preach on this text as I had hoped to do, for I am full of pain and have a heavy headache, but thank God I have no heartache. With such a glorious truth before me, sweet to my soul are these words, my times are in your hand. Take the golden sentence home with you. Keep this truth in your mind. Let it lie on your tongue like a wafer made with honey. Let it dissolve until your whole nature is sweetened by it. Yes, dear old lady, you that have come out of the workhouse this morning to hear this sermon, say to yourself, my times are in your hand. Yes, you, dear friend, who cannot find a job and have been walking the shoes off your feet in the vain endeavor to find one, you also may say, my times are in your hand. Yes, my dear sister, pining away with untreatable tuberculosis, this may be your song, my times are in your hand. Yes, young man, you that have just started in business and have met with a crushing loss, it will be for your benefit after all. Therefore say, my times are in your hand. This little sentence to my mind swells into a hymn. It buds and blossoms into a psalm. Few are the words, but mighty is the sense and full of rest. Well, I'm going to take up this text both morning and evening, and particularly in the evening, we'll be developing lines of thought from Charles Spurgeon. But notice with me, and if you have a handout sheet, you care to get one on the little stand right behind the last pew. We have, first of all, Roman numeral 1, David's persecution to praise psalm reviewed. The persecution to praise psalm reviewed. And first of all, a plea for deliverance from his enemy's trap. We saw this in our reading. These enemies are lying about him, but he is turning with hope to God. He is looking to God as his refuge in verse 1. He is looking to him as a rock of refuge, verse 2, a strong fortress to save. And in verse 5, he says, into your hand I commit my spirit, for you have redeemed me. Secondly, B, we have in verses 6 through 8 a statement of commitment and confidence. The commitment has already begun, hasn't it? You are my rock. You're the one that I'm looking to help me. The commitment has already begun in verse 5. Into your hand I commit my spirit. You have redeemed me, O Lord, faithful God. But we further have it in verse 6 that he is trusting in the Lord. We have the confidence coming out in verse 7. I will rejoice and be glad in your steadfast love, your covenant love. And in verse 8, we have his confidence stated, you have not delivered me into the hand of my enemy. And what we're going to find is that in these early verses, verse 6, verse 5, into your hand I commit my spirit. And then he recognizes, you have not put me into the hand of my enemy. And then we'll come to our main text in verse 15, that my times are in your hand. Thirdly, C, there is a plea for mercy with a description of his distress, sin, and his enemies. And notice the impact of his sin. It's there in verse 9, marked by grief with his soul and his body. And then the middle part of verse 10, my strength fails because of my iniquity. Now, David doesn't take the time here to lay out how much of his trouble is due to his sin and how much is due to his adversaries. That's the second part here in verse 11 and 12 and 13. The impact of David's enemies. Because of all my adversaries, I have become a reproach. I'm a disgrace. I am ashamed to be in the presence of those who know me because they are thinking of me in this distorted way. They have believed the lies of my enemies. He speaks at how he is forgotten like one who is dead, verse 12. But notice with me particularly verse 13. You and I face troubles, but I venture to say that David's troubles reached a higher level. Verse 13, for I hear the whispering of many, terror on every side, as they scheme together against me, as they plot to take my life. Now, maybe this is in one of those earlier times in David's life when he is on the run from King Saul. Maybe it's one of those times when he's in a city and he's asking God, are these men of the city, are they going to deliver me over to King Saul? And the message comes back, well, yes, they are. Maybe it's a time of Absalom's civil war, when David has to flee for his life from his capital city. And maybe he has the sense that those who are in the city are trying to decide, do you think Absalom's going to win? Do you think that David's going to win? Well, we're afraid that the young guy's going to win and the old guy's going to lose, so we need to protect ourselves by leaning over in the direction of Absalom. Fourthly, D, we have the paragraph that we'll be looking at primarily this morning, a statement of trust and a plea for deliverance. We'll just look at it very briefly here. Notice the contrast. Once again, we've got the enemies. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. Verse 15, rescue me from these enemies. Make your face shine on your servant. And then E, we have in 19 and 20 a proclamation of God's widespread kindness. How do we know that it is right for us to dip into this Psalm of David and apply what David experienced both in adversaries and deliverance from those how do we know that that is really for us, that it's relevant for us? Well, here's a broadening of David's experience of persecution and praise to all of God's children. See it there in verse 19. Oh, how abundant is your goodness which you have stored up for me. No, for those who fear you, and worked for those who take refuge in you in the sight of the children of mankind. Verse 20, in the cover of your presence, you hide them. It's not just David, it's not just me. From the plots of men, you store them in your shelter from the strife of tongues. David says, this is what I'm going through at the present time, but this is something that others of the people of God are going to experience, and the same way that you care for me, you're going to care for your people. So Spurgeon is right to what he does more of is to take this half of a verse, verse 15, lift it out, and then just begin applying it in every direction. He is right to apply it to the dear old lady that has just come in from the workplace and is looking for a word of encouragement and direction from God. Then finally, F, there is this call to praise Yahweh. In verse 21 through 24, here in 21 and 22 is a rehearsing of God's steadfast love. We've heard of it many times before in the Psalms, the chesed, that covenant love, that covenant steadfast love of God. Here it is, verse 21. Blessed be the Lord, Yahweh, for he has wondrously shown his chesed, his steadfast love to me when I was in a besieged city. I said in my alarm, I am cut off from your sight, but you heard the voice of my pleas for mercy when I cried to you for help. And then in verse 23 and 24, God calls on all of his children. David calls on all of God's children to love God. Love the Lord, all you his saints. The Lord preserves the faithful, but abundantly repays the one who acts in pride. So you see, David starts out with his own experience, but by the time we reach the end of the psalm, it is broadly applied to the people of God. I'm not the only one, David says, that is going to face trouble. I'm not the only one who's going to have some proud individuals seeking to oppress me. But this is what God is going to do. And because of all of this, see where verse 24 ends. Be strong. Let your heart take courage, all you who wait for the Lord. Well, I've only been a Christian for a very short period of time, and I really haven't faced any troubles or difficulties of any significance. You will. You will. But as you do so, don't falter, don't faint. Take courage, all you who wait for the Lord. Well, there's our quick review. The whole psalm reviewed. But now we come to Roman numeral 2, David's individualized trust. His individualized trust in Yahweh. And we find, first of all, David's bold, personalized confidence in Yahweh. And isn't this one of the things that we love about the Psalms? Verse 14 begins, but I trust in you, O Lord. But I. It stands in contrast to all the persecution of the enemies. And David has recounted all of the difficult things that have gone on with him. But some of us, when we would recount the difficulties that we have faced and what bad men, bad women have done to us, saying this and saying the other, then the next thing out of our mouths, God, would be, why are you letting this happen? I'd like to give you a little advice, God, on how to manage your world, particularly my world. No, David is not laying out all of his troubles so that he can complain about God. He's not laying out all of his troubles and saying, so it only makes sense for me to walk away from you, God. Despite all of these troubles, he is saying here in verse 14, but I trust in Yahweh. Wilson says, contrary to what one might expect under the circumstances, I do not despair, but I surrender in trust to the hand of God. And he names Yahweh as the only source of his trust. Let's think for a moment about that name, O Lord. Lord in all caps. Adonai. It is speaking of Yahweh. David regards God as reliable, and therefore he says, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to keep doing this. He's not challenging God, but he's restating, I have trusted in you up to this point, and I am restating my affirmation of trust. And in his dire straits, what does he talk about? He talks about Yahweh, who is the covenant-making, covenant-keeping God. And he talks about that chesed, which is God's steadfast love. I got my persecution here, but I've got a God who makes a covenant and keeps a covenant, and I've got a God who is expressing his steadfast love, and that's where I am. Secondly, B. So we see David's confidence. But now David's plain, personalized owning of God. The latter part of verse 14. I say, you are my God. I do not say you are a God, you are somebody's God, but I say you are my God. Here is his determined allegiance. You are my God. It has such sweetness in it. There are few things that would be more precious to us than us being able to say in a trial, in a crisis of life, facing death, you are my God. I belong to you and you belong to me. Do you see the value of a personal relationship with God? Here's David going through this kind of calamity where he's got enemies that have been lying about him and society has been impacted. I go out in the street and I'm like a dead man. My neighbors, they don't even want to acknowledge me. People see me and they flee. They go the other way instead of coming to embrace me. But in the face of that, you are my God. You know about God, but do you know God in the way that David did? Do you trust the God of the Bible? When you come into a crisis situation, can you pivot to heaven in your prayers and direct your focus on Yahweh, the God who makes his covenant and keeps his covenant? Can you look to him with confidence, and can you reach out to heaven and say, you are my God? Well, 2022 is over, 2023 is beginning. And what a wonderful time for us to say, if we've never said it before, all of my tomorrows, all of my days that are left, I will live them knowing that Jesus Christ, the Son of God, is my Savior and my Lord. Roman numeral 1, the psalm reviewed. Roman numeral 2, David's individualized trust. And now as we come to verse 13, notice with me, Roman numeral 3, David's individualized embrace of God's absolute sovereignty. His individualized embrace of it. He's not dealing with just the theory, is he? For we find in verse 15, my times are in your hand. He's not saying most people's times, some people's times, but it is my times, my epochs, my periods, my segments of existence, whatever you want to call it. Mine are in the hand of God. It is God's sovereignty embraced. So very obviously, David has embraced something of God's absolute sovereignty out there, at least in the theoretical realm, but it's even more than that, isn't it? So what I want to do is to read through 15 verses with very little comment, the sort of thing that David would have embraced regarding the sovereignty of God. And I've just been listening to someone's writings from 500 years ago being read aloud. And I'm just in a section on the providence of God. And some of these verses are there, and there's a myriad of verses that I didn't even think of that are included in what I'm hearing. But here's the first, at Genesis 50 and verse 20, what did Joseph learn? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. Oh, there's so much that could be said about that. Job 42 and verse 2, towards the end of Job, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Psalm 103:19, the Lord has established his throne in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. 115:3, our God is in the heavens, he does all that he pleases. 135:6, whatever the Lord pleases, he does, in heaven and on earth, in the seas and all deeps. 16:4 of Proverbs, the Lord has made everything for its purpose, even the wicked for the day of trouble. 16:33, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. You take the die and you toss them, and there they are. And you think, what could be more chance than this? And God says it looks like chance to you. Solomon says, in the eyes of God, it is ordained by him. Isaiah 14:24, the Lord of hosts has sworn, as I have planned, so shall it be. And as I have purposed, so shall it stand. 45:7, I form light and create darkness. I make well-being and create calamity. I am the Lord who does all these things. 46:10, declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things that are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose. The formerly pagan Nebuchadnezzar, 4:35 of Daniel, all the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, and he does according to his will among the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say to him, what have you done? John 6:44, coming into the realm of salvation. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I will raise him up on the last day. Acts 2:23. This Jesus, delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God, you crucified and killed by the hands of lawless men. And of course, Romans 8:28, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose. And the last, Ephesians 1 and verse 11, the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. There is something of the broad biblical teaching of the absolute sovereignty of God. It's hard to argue against the plainness of those passages. That informed David's thinking But it's not enough to see that he had embraced a general systematic theology principle that God is sovereign. It's more than that, isn't it? It's personalized. So come with me, secondly. God's sovereignty individualized and personalized. My times are in your hand. Rescue me from the hand of my enemies and my persecutors. David commits himself to this broad general truth. He brings it home to his own heart. He lays it down as the foundation that he is going to stand on, the foundation that you and I need to live on. My times are in your hand. See how he has already been doing this from the beginning of the psalm. In you, O Yahweh, do I take refuge. Be a rock of refuge, for you are my rock and my fortress. Into your hand I commit my spirit. You are absolutely sovereign. I recognize it, but it's like the psalm that we sang, we want it to be so. If my times were not in your hand, and if it were in my power to put them, that's where I'd put me. My times are in your hand. Thirdly, see, notice how God's sovereignty is embraced and individualized in a bad time. My times are in your hand. And when I first read Spurgeon's sermon on this, he's lifting this first half of verse 15 out, and he doesn't even make reference to the latter part. Well, you can't do that. You can't just lift out half of a verse and then go on. And because he doesn't talk about it doesn't mean he didn't read it. But when you and I read it, when we see the larger context, far from saying, oh, what the preacher is saying this morning doesn't bear the weight of the direction of the overall context. No, you come with me and you look at the context of this verse. He's trusting God in bad times, really bad times. And these times, whether good or bad, they are in God's hand. So the practical value of my times in your hand are no way lessened by us looking at the context, but rather it is heightened. And remember, he has reason to believe that there are multiple individuals that are discussing a plot to assassinate him. My times are in your hand. The psalm reviewed. His trust individualized. His embrace of absolute sovereignty. And now Roman numeral 4, David's individualized petitions to his God. He's going to pray now. He doesn't turn away from his God. He doesn't have a hard heart. He's not angry with his God. He's recognizing the sovereignty of God. Then he's going to that personal God and he is begging these petitions. First of all, David petitions for himself. Latter part of verse 15. And here it is in the latter part of verse 15 where he's asking that God would rescue him from the hand of his enemies. Then we've got verse 16. Make your face shine on your servant. It's a little different from, what are you doing, God? I don't like this. Why do good things happen? Why do bad things happen to good people? But instead, David is saying to his God, I want to be close to you. I'm asking that you will shine the glory of your face on me. Help me to realize that your face is close by, and help me to be brightened by the glory of that face. The latter part of verse 16. Save me in your steadfast love. You're the covenant-making, covenant-keeping God, and you've got this steadfast love, and I don't want you to forget me, and so out of that I'm asking that you will save me. It's not save me because I am so wonderful. He is pleading the mercy of God. He's already talked in verse 5 that God is the one who has redeemed him. It's not on the basis of merit. Just look at Psalm 32. But David only knows how to plead for God's mercy and God's love. Save me in your steadfast love. And now verse 17. O Lord, all caps, O Yahweh, let me not be put to shame. Put to shame, for I call upon you. Don't ultimately let wickedness dominate over me. Don't let the liar's lies lodge long-term in people's minds. Don't let the profane jeer at my confidence in my God. Lord, I am in a mess. Please fix it. Secondly, B, David's petitions for his enemies. Prays for himself, prays for his enemies. Latter part of verse 17. Let the wicked be put to shame. Let them go silently to Sheol. Now, David in his time is very plainly asking, God, they're trying to fill my face with shame. I'm asking you that you'll give to them what they're trying to give to me. Cause them to their amazement to see my wrongs righted and their own pride horribly confounded. Spurgeon comments, a milder spirit rules our prayers under the gentle reign of the Prince of Peace, and therefore we can use such words only as these in their prophetic sense. We can pray, recognizing that the best thing that will happen to these who are hard-hearted against God, the best thing that they can expect is that there will be the shame and the silence in their death. But then we go on, verse 18. Let the lying lips be silent. And he goes on, which speak insolently against the righteous in pride. And God, they're just talking up a storm against me. Can't we at least make their lips to be mute? Spurgeon gives a sample of how he would pray this. May God silence them either by leading them to repentance, by putting them to thorough shame, or placing them in positions where they may say that which will stand for nothing. And now fifthly, practical lessons. We've taken the time to read, to look at the whole psalm in a broad way, how it fits together. We've looked at that paragraph in more detail, 14 through 18. And now let's come to practical lessons, Roman numeral 5. Lessons from David's individualized embrace that his times are in God's hands. First of all, A, this conviction, the conviction that my times are in your hand, creates a sense of the nearness of God. A sense of the nearness of God. If God is recognized as being involved in all of the details of your and my daily lives, then we will feel God near. And it's interesting that immediately after David states in verse 15, my time are in your hand, then he goes on immediately to say in verse 16, make your face shine on your servant. It's as though he is recognizing God is there. God is close. He just needs to let the light of his glory shine on me. Our Puritan fathers embraced this truth of the sovereignty of God, and they were able to perhaps more easily walk with God because they believed that God is arranging every detail of their lives and every detail that comes about in the interaction of the nations. There is a tendency of the world to want to get away from God. I want to forget about him. I don't want to recognize that he is my creator. Then I'll have to pay the rent. I don't want to pay the rent. I don't want to think about God. I want to get away from God. And so this has evolved. And there's time and there's chance. And that helps me to not have to think about God. But the Christian is one who wants to be closer to God. God, shine the glory of your face on me. Men of the world cannot tolerate God in their thinking. And so instead of having God, we've got nature. We've got time and chance. We've got fortune. And yet it's a funny sort of chance. It's a kind of nature, it's a kind of chance if we watch just even the nature shows. It's a nature, it's a time and chance that has got intelligence in it. And this is why this is developed. They saw that, and so due to that intelligence, it needed to be this way. What kind of a world is this? We cannot allow an intelligent God, but we can allow an intelligent chance. I wonder where that chance, that spirit of chance, that spirit of nature, I wonder where he or she lives. So different is the message of the Bible. The Bible says, my times are in your hand. Proverbs 16:33, we've already seen it. The lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. It looks like chance to us, but it doesn't look like chance to God. Matthew 10:25, or not 10:29. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. There's not much that is left to chance if Jesus is telling the truth. Insignificant of insignificant birds, the sparrow. And God orders that by his will. And God knows how many hairs are in your head and my head. Blessed is the man that is done with chance, who never speaks of luck, but believes that from the least to the greatest, every event is ordered by the Lord. On a warm winter day when the sun is shining, God ordains the bug that is walking up on that sunny side of the building as much as he has ordained an epidemic that influences the nations. We need to believe this, for if the least event be omitted from the supreme government, then so may the next be omitted, and then the next, and then the next, and then pretty soon there's nothing left in the divine government. But we ought rather to believe that he works all things according to the counsel of his own will. There is no blind fate ruling in the world. God's eye leaves nothing in providence blind. It is God, it is not blind fate that views all things with his love for his own. And here we see the condescension of God. What's in God's hand? All the stars of all the galaxies are in God's hand. That great host of angels that are worshiping God now in heaven, that are perfectly, that are sinless, they never fell. Isn't that enough in the hand of God? No. A lowly woman, an insignificant man, they are as well in the hand of God. He finds room to fit us there. God is near his people, and he is near them with all of his attributes, his wisdom, his power, his faithfulness, and these are under oath to work for the good of those who put their trust in him. God causes all things to work together for good. So don't begin the new year lamenting that God is not with you. Rather believe that there is no place where God is not with you. Don't let a spirit of loneliness settle down on you. A spirit of spiritual loneliness where you're wondering where God is. No, see that your times are in God's hand, even if you're in a situation that with David would call bad. And then see the movement. Let the glory of your face shine on me. There's a great deal of help in this first point of application. We see that our times are in God's hand, and we recognize that if we will live that way, we will live more consciously of the presence of God. Secondly, B, the conviction. This conviction, my times are in God's hand. This conviction wonderfully argues for our eternal glory. If he takes care of everything here, will I make it to heaven? Well, of course you will as a believer. He that has brought you this far will carry you on. Psalm 23. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Yahweh forever. And I am sure of this, Paul writes, that he who has begun a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Well, eternity is not time. It's not really my time. Well, call it whatever you want. Your segment of existence, your periods, the significant epochs in your life, they're all in God's hands. Hear how Peter words it. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. According to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, to an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who by God's power are being guarded through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. Once God, as the workman, takes up something in his hand, he's not going to put it down. He's not going to forget about it. He's not going to bring it to completion. My times are in your hand, and that brings me to eternity out in the future. But I ask you, do you like this verse? Does it bring comfort to you? My times are in God's hand. I like that. I love it. I'm going to base my life on it. Well, if you're an unbeliever, if you're living in rebellion to God, then there's not so much comfort that comes from knowing that your existence is under the power of God. Let's fast forward to the end of time. Matthew 25, Jesus taught us himself to look at that day. And Jesus in Matthew 25:31 says, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. The last time that our beautiful little earth is going to go around the sun, it's over. And we're summoned into the presence of Jesus Christ. Before him will be gathered all the nations, and he will separate people from one another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will place the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on the right, come, you blessed who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. The God that you sin against, the God whose grace you resist, has absolute power over you. Know this, that if you forget God, God will hold you accountable and judge you, and that for all eternity. You may not like it, but you need to embrace it and deal with it. But though you have provoked God by saying, God, I want to get away from you. Could you please go away? I don't believe in you and your intelligence and your creation. I believe in chance plus time. That's what's brought about all this order. So go away, though you've been saying that to God, though you've been living as if your body belonged to you, that you don't need to pay the God who made you any rent by giving him glory. Yet this God comes in the person of Jesus Christ and offers you free and complete salvation from all of your sins. Did you catch that as we read it? Verse 5. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Where have you heard that before? Well, you've heard it from Jesus on the cross. And what Jesus does at his moment of death is to take words of David when he was living, and he applies it to that situation. And they are good words at death. And I'm told that those who have witnessed many passing from this world have seen these words used over and over again, where a believer closes their eyes in faith. Into your hand I commit my spirit. It's good for them to do it. But you can't do it at the day of your death if you don't do it in the days of your living. And observe that David's main concern in life and death is not his body, and it's not his state. It's not how much wealth he has. It's his never-dying soul. It's his spirit. This is his great jewel and his secret treasure. And if this spirit be well, then all is well. He commits his spirit to the hand of God, and so are you and I. And if you will, you are most blessed, because God will give you comfort in this life, and he will receive that never-dying spirit into his presence when you breathe your last. Let's pray. Father, we ask very simply that you in your kindness and grace would cause each one of us to love this half a verse. My times are in your hand. In this, we are acknowledging that you are God. You are the Lord of the universe. You've created me. You own me. I need to pay the rent of your glory. And we ask our God that you would bring us to the foot of the cross, where we would see that our sins go to you, Lord Jesus, and your perfect righteousness comes to us. And that way we can have great comfort in good times and in bad times. For we know that you are our Lord, and you will carry us through. And when we do die, you will receive us into your immediate presence. We pray these things in Christ's